You wake up to a morning that feels wrong in the best possible way because the air is crisp without being sharp, the sky is clean, without looking filtered, and the sunlight has that steady, gentle quality people use to describe in old photos.
Ow, the premise lands fast.
What if we actually fix climate change? Not halfway, not with excuses, not with glossy pledges and missed deadlines, but for real, globally, measurably, and permanently. It starts with the first obvious sign, the one even denial cannot meme away. The ocean stops climbing. Not slows, not hesitates, stops. Coastal gauges that have been rising for decades hold still for months, then years, and the charts flatten so hard that climate scientists stare at them like they are witnessing a glitch in physics. Then the second sign hits the body instead of the data. Heat waves still happen, but they stop breaking records. Wildfire seasons shrink. The worst flood maps become outdated. Insurance companies quietly revise their projections downward for the first time in living memory. The world feels like it has exhaled after a long panic. And people celebrate the way humans always do when something terrifying backs away. They assume the danger is gone, and they are the heroes of the story. The first turn is the global sprint that made it happen. Fossil fuels do not vanish overnight, but the incentives flip so aggressively that the old system begins to crumble like a cliff face in rain. Cheap storage becomes boring and ubiquitous. Grids modernize like a software update that somehow reaches every nation. Heat pumps replace boilers. Industrial processes shift, not as a sacrifice, but as a competitive advantage. Methane leaks get hunted like criminal evidence. Shipping and aviation become cleaner, slower at first, then efficient. Cities redesign streets to favor human bodies again, because it turns out the simplest technology for reducing emissions is still walking. Governments that used to argue now race, because nobody wants to be the last economy stuck paying for a dead century. The world's richest countries finally fund adaptation and loss and damage at a scale that looks like war mobilization. And the poorest countries leapfrog straight to clean infrastructure, skipping the soot-filled middle. The planet responds like a patient responding to treatment, not instantly cured, but unmistakably stabilizing. The next turn arrives with a surprising emotion: grief. Once the panic quiets, people begin to feel the weight of what was almost lost, and what was lost anyway. Entire ecosystems do not rewind like a video. Glaciers do not regrow on command. Extinct species do not come back, because we became responsible. The world is saved in the way a burning house is saved when the fire stops spreading, which is to say the walls still smell like smoke, and some rooms are gone forever. That grief turns into a global ritual of accountability. Names get written, not just of victims, but of decisions, years, policies, delays. Some corporations collapse under lawsuits that finally land like meteors. Some leaders are remembered as villains, some as cowards, some as late heroes. And then, as the world begins to adapt to this new steady climate, a third turn hits from an unexpected direction. The economy of emergency begins to die. Entire sectors were built on catastrophe, on disaster response, on rebuilding, on insurance pricing fear into spreadsheets, on politicians campaigning on chaos. When the climate stops spiraling, those systems lose their fuel. Sounds good until it becomes personal. Millions of jobs were attached to the old world. Entire regions depended on extraction. Entire portfolios depended on volatility. Fixing climate change is not just a technical transition. It is a social one. And social transitions always produce friction because people do not move smoothly when their identities are being rewritten. Protests erupt, not from denial anymore, but from displacement. Communities that powered the industrial age demand dignity in the clean age. And the world learns a new lesson. You cannot decarbonize a planet without also rebalancing power, because carbon was never just chemistry, it was leverage. The next turn is the first real taste of victory. Nature begins to answer back. Rewilded corridors, reconnect habitats. Fisheries recover where protections are enforced. Cities plant trees like they are building shade cathedrals. Rivers get daylight again. The air quality improvements are so dramatic that hospitals see fewer asthma attacks within a single season. Life expectancy ticks upward in places that used to choke. People start to realize the climate fight was also a public health revolution in disguise. And then the world's mood shifts from desperation to possibility. New architecture appears, designed for heat and storms, but also for beauty. Food systems diversify. Regenerative agriculture turns soil into a bank account of carbon. Coastal defenses become living reefs. It feels like a renaissance built on survival instinct. And for a moment, the story looks like a clean, happy ending. That is when the dark twist begins to creep in, because humans cannot fix a problem this large without gaining a new kind of power, and power always asks to be used again. The technologies that stabilize the climate scale beyond emissions reduction, carbon capture becomes carbon management, atmospheric monitoring becomes atmospheric control. Nations that once competed for oil begin competing for cooling, for rainfall influence, for who gets to run the machines that can tilt weather patterns by fractions of a degree. The world doesn't return to innocence, graduates into stewardship, and stewardship has a shadow called ownership. The first time a regional drought threatens crops, someone proposes intervention, and it works. Cloud brightening reduces heat in a shipping corridor. Stratospheric aerosols get tested to shave off peak temperatures during an emergency. It is framed as insurance, as backup, as last resort. But last resorts have a habit of becoming defaults when people get used to the idea that nature is negotiable. Another turn tightens the knot. Geopolitics adapts. Countries argue not about emissions targets, but about climate settings. One region wants more rainfall, another fears floods. One nation wants cooler summers, another relies on seasonal heat for agriculture. The planet becomes a shared thermostat with billions of hands reaching for the dial, and the fear is no longer that we will destroy the climate by accident, but that we will reshape it on purpose in ways that benefit the powerful first. And then comes the aha. The reflective ending that flips the meaning of fix. Fixing climate change does not mean returning to the past. It means choosing what future you are building and who gets to decide. The real miracle is not that the temperature curve flattened. It is that humanity proved it can coordinate at planetary scale when it finally treats reality as non-negotiable. But the real danger is that once a species learns it can move the sky, it may forget the difference between responsibility and domination. A solved crisis does not end history. It changes the genre. The question stops being whether we can prevent collapse, and it becomes whether we can handle success without turning it into another form of control. Because a stable climate is not the finish line. It is the foundation. And foundations can hold hospitals and schools and forests, or they can hold new empires built from the same old greed wearing green branding. If you want more cinematic what-if stories that take a hopeful premise and push it until it reveals the uncomfortable truth underneath, like and subscribe, and comment what you want next. If we truly fixed climate change, what would you trust humanity with next, and what would you never let us control?